Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Rosie Murphy.
And I'm Sammy Roth, and this is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
We're still watching Season 4, but we have reached the season finale. There's No Place Like Home, Parts 2 and 3.
And we are returning this week to our conversation with Michael Emerson. We had him on for his centric episode In the Shape of Things to Come. And we're going to talk about his stuff in this episode and some stuff from Seasons 5 and 6 also.
There are 2 hours of television to discuss, so let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it.
You probably have figured out by now, we start every week on The Hatch with our hottest takes about the week's episode. The finale, Rosie, what's your hot take? There's No Place Like Home, Parts 2 and 3.
Yeah. Nobody noticed that there was a hole in the fuel tank of the helicopter?
Oh, come on. They were in a gunfight. They were in a hurry. Nobody was examining the side of the helicopter for
They
holes.
did examine it. Frank was sitting in that field with it for like a while. I was kind of like, oh, okay. The one time we don't check, there's a leak, of course. And of course, like it's a storytelling device. I get it. It's fine.
Okay, fine. As long as you're doing a silly complaint, I'll just quickly add a silly complaint here that I wasn't going to even bring up, but just to match yours. When they're all fleeing the freighter at the end, and the bomb is about to go off, of course our heroes are all, getting on the helicopter. The other people on the boat are not even trying to get on the helicopter. They're all just grabbing their life vests and, like, jumping overboard, like all of the extras in freighter hands, when there's a helicopter right there. Just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying.
And no one's inviting them to get on the helicopter either? That doesn't
No,
seem
and that I'm less
nice.
surprised by, but it's just like nobody's even trying.
Yeah.
Anyway, love this episode. Love this episode a lot. And in fact, my hot take, one of the things that I love about this episode of the very, very many, when you're watching the previously on Lost going into it, the last scene that they show you in the previouslys is going back to the end of season 3, where Jack is screaming at Kate as she drives away, we have to go back, we have to go back. And it's such a, like, goosebump-inducing moment for me when the previouslys end and the episode starts, but you're still right there and you're like, oh shit, we're going to continue this scene and see what happens next. And Kate turns around and there's more to it. My skin is like crawling even right now talking about it because it's such a cool moment. And it's also so cool because, like, in the whole year of watching these flash forwards, we have not gotten that far into the story, and we haven't revisited that, and we haven't revisited the Jeremy Bentham thing either.
No, since I don't think his name has been mentioned in season 4.
It hasn't, and it's just, I know we debated last week, the storytelling structure and the way they've brought things together, but to me this is just like another thing that's so impressive about how they've done this, where they've set up all of these other mysteries all season and all of these other threads, and here we are going back to this big one from a full season ago that's not been mentioned once, and it's like, oh yeah, we don't fucking know who Jeremy Bentham is.
Yeah, and it's in the flash forward sequences, it's mentioned. It took me like 2 mentions for it to really stick, because the first mention of him is very much in passing, but then when Saeed goes to visit Hurley, he brings up Jeremy Bentham, and they kind of linger on it.
Right,
and I was
and Hurley's about to say who it really is, and Saeed says, don't say his
Saeed
name,
cuts
we're
him
being
off.
watched.
Yeah, and that's when I was sort of like, oh shit, Saeed's worried about this. Like, I better also be worried about this. When the stakes of it really, really hit me as a viewer.
I just think that the way they've laid out this story is ridiculous, in a good way. It's just incredible to me. So that's my hot take once again.
This is the true converging of the timelines. I mean, quite literally, we return to the same moment, and then Kate's car backs up, and it's like, oh, right. Continuing on.
But that's the thing. It's the converging of the timelines, but there's also still so much story to tell both behind this moment and ahead of this moment. Like, we still get the whole, life and death of Jeremy Bentham story where we find out, what happens when Locke left the island and how Jack became this person. We still get the whole on-island story, which is referenced here. There's a line at the end in the scene with Jack and Ben at the funeral parlor where Jack says that Jeremy Bentham told him all of the bad stuff that happened after they left, and Jack said it's Jack's fault, and it's like that's several years of material, even before this on the island that we don't know. And, we don't know what's going to happen next. We still haven't even filled in all the gaps in the flash forwards. We don't know that we haven't gotten the Kate and Cassidy storyline yet, which has been hinted at in Something Nice Back Home. Like, there's so much yet to come, even with everything they're revealing here, and it's totally remarkable to me.
If we may kind of jump back to minor complaints about the episode, we have a hot take this week from our listener, Ian.
Hey guys, this is Ian from North Reading, Massachusetts. I'm a big fan of the show, and I've got a hot take about the scene in the finale of season 4 where Jen dies. I think the show really could have done that scene a lot better. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that Jen is staying down there, just not really doing much of anything. Once that red light goes off, you would think he would go back up and make sure son was taken care of, but he just kind of sits around and doesn't do anything. And I always thought that was a really disappointing part of the finale, that they couldn't have given Jen more of a hero's tragedy at the end, even though he doesn't really die. You know what I mean. But why didn't they just let him be the person with bomb squad experience in the Army? After all, he was in the Korean Army too. They mentioned that in DOC that he had compulsory Army service. So why couldn't he be the one fighting really hard to disarm the bomb instead of Desmond, and really give him a hero's moment where he doesn't realize until it's too late that, he needs to go back up to the surface of the freighter. It would have been the same thing, only he would have gone out a little bit more heroically, and it would have been a great chance for him and Michael to work together.
I gotta say, I agree with Ian 100% on this. When I was watching the episode, I was like, they had time! They had time to get Jen! And I mean, I get it. Again, I get why they didn't. But it was heart-wrenching to watch.
Yeah, the excuse that there is in the show, I mean, Jin is trying to defuse the bomb, right? Like, he's he's drawn out, diagrams, and he's looking to where the wires go, and, it doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, Desmond was the one with the explosive experience. So I like Ian's idea that, Jin was in the Army too, so it could have been him. It would have made a little more sense. But yeah, regardless of what was really happening, that whole time I was screaming, Jin, don't be a hero. What are you doing down there? Like, son is up on the deck and there's a fucking bomb. Michael says to him at the end, you're going to be a father, go. And it's like, yeah, but shouldn't Jen have realized that 10 minutes ago?
Yeah.
Very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really nice moment for Michael, I guess. Like a small moment of the old Michael-Jen friendship, you know, dating back to season 1. It was nice to get a little glimmer of that.
We also get the nice Michael-Son moment. I mean, dating back to the Michael-Son friendship where Son tells him she's pregnant and... Michael's grimacing inside because he knows that she's in grave danger, even though he's telling her otherwise. Michael gets some nice scenes here at the end, and frankly, even though it goes by quickly, amidst this, huge action sequence and Son and Jin and all the screaming, but the moment, where Christian Shepherd says to Michael, "You can go now." Just another cool lost mythology moment that's smoothly integrated into this sequence, but also Michael gets to make the sacrifice that he's wanted to make for a long time now, and he actually does get to save them. Michael gets the ending that he wants, and it's tragic, but it's very heroic. Mm-hmm. Very heroic. Anyway, we have another listener hot take, don't we?
We do.
Let's play that.
Hi. So, in the season 4 finale, Ben tells Locke that Jacob told him to move the island, and that John didn't need to come because Jacob wanted Ben to suffer the consequences. But I'm wondering if this is really true, or if Ben has some sort of ulterior motive to be the one to move the island, because we see most times he's not telling the truth when he is talking. So, and then in season 5, we see that John ends up basically being encouraged by the Man in Black to move the island again. So it's I think he meant for John to do it the first time, don't you? But I was just wondering what you guys think about Ben having ulterior motives for moving the island.
Questioning Ben's motives, one of our favorite activities here on the Hatch.
I think this listener is onto something. I took many notes while watching this finale about what do I think Ben is really up to, and is he just manipulating Locke here? I think it's a ripe area for inquiry.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Ben tells John several lies while they're down in the Orchid, right?
Yes.
One is whoever moves the island can never come back, which, of course, he does come back.
Mm-hmm.
Are there others?
Well, I think that's the main bald-faced lie, but I think in general, I got the strong sense all through this episode that Ben is making fun of Locke. And that the episode is, or at the very least, Ben is drawing attention to, in the episode, is drawing attention to all of the stuff that Locke doesn't know and Locke's inability to lead in the absence of Ben. Mm-hmm. There are so many lines like,
"What do I tell him to do?" "You'll find your way, John. You always do."
And frankly, I don't think Ben believes that. I think Ben is either expecting Locke to fail or, perhaps knows that time flashes will happen and that Locke's never going to get a chance to do it. Like, I don't know, we get so many moments this week where Locke is asking, like, when they go down to the Orchid, he's like, is this the magic box? And it's like, no, John, like, Ben already told you the magic box was a metaphor, like...
That seemed like it. So when John said that seemed like a bit of a joke to me.
Maybe, but there were just other moments, like even small stuff, like, not being able to find the Anthuriums, which Ben makes fun of him for. And Locke's like, I don't know what they look like. And when, Ben again says to Locke, he says...
Well, John, I really wasn't thinking straight. Sometimes good command decisions get compromised by bad emotional responses. I'm sure you're going to do a much better job of separating the two than I ever did.
And I read that as so sarcastic because that's not Locke at all. Locke doesn't do a good job of separating emotional responses from command decisions. He's so much more emotional than Ben in terms of motivating his actions. Like, I was thinking of what you used to say all the time, that Locke is really the spirit guide. And I was thinking, like, yeah, that's Locke's role. Like, he's not the natural leader. Like, Locke is down there, Ben is moving stuff around in the Orchid, and Locke's screaming at him, what are you doing? I asked you a question. Mm-hmm. And, Locke is claiming to Jack, this is a place where miracles happen, and how do you not believe? And it's very clear that Locke doesn't really know what's going on, desperately wants to know what's going on, and is not prepared to go lead these people. So I bring that all up because I think this idea that Ben is either manipulating him. I mean, I think that Ben is already thinking Locke is going to fail as a leader. I know this, and I am already plotting to get back and take power again. Mm. Or at the very least, he hasn't ruled that out, and he has that in mind here and is not setting Locke up for success. Like, he could have told Locke what to do, and he said, oh, you'll find your way.
Right.
No, he won't.
I think that's partly true. I think the other part of what's going on here is that Ben is still harboring a lot of resentment toward Jacob and toward this idea that I did everything right and yet John was chosen instead of me for this role. Like, there's some cosmic force at work here that is outside of Ben's control that has decided he should no longer be in leadership. It has resulted in the death of his daughter. And I think he's a little bit like, he in that whole scene, that whole exchange in the Orchid, he feels a little bit sardonic, and he's saying like,
yeah,
oh, you'll find your way. It had this whole overtone to me of, well, you were you're very special, John, so you'll figure it out, and apparently I'm not. That was kind of,
yeah. It sounds like we're seeing the same stuff, but maybe interpreting it a bit differently.
Yeah, I saw it more, I think, as jealousy on Ben's part, or, a sense of rejection and a sense of, well, fuck it, I guess I'm not wanted here, so I'll just, not wanted here by Jacob. And,
right.
I'll take that out on John a little bit. It's not really his fault.
Well, he's clearly not interested in helping John do
a
better job. Like, the fact that he's, shooting sarcasm at him all episode and not actually providing any advice, like, it's not like he has any real interest in John succeeding, for sure.
No. But I think... I don't know that I go with you all the way to Ben is already plotting to come back to the island and take power.
Based on most of the evidence, I think your interpretation is probably better. But the thing that you brought up first, the lie, whoever moves this, island can never come back.
Right.
Like, as far as I mean, it's such a blatant lie, and as far as I remember, it's something that never comes up again in any context. And we know, the moment Ben gets off the island, basically, he's already plotting. Maybe not necessarily plotting immediately to get back. That comes later, but he certainly, gets off the island and sees Saeed on television and starts plotting for how he's going to win his war with Charles Widmore. And he knows that what Widmore really wants is the island. So I don't know. I think there's enough evidence to suggest here that Ben, the wheels are already turning ahead, to what comes next. And, by telling Locke he can never come back, at the very least, he's creating the element of surprise for when he does. Locke's guard will be down after that he doesn't have to deal with Ben anymore.
But even when Ben gets off the island, in what we have already seen in season 4, leaving season 5 for later, he's totally focused on vengeance against Charles Widmore. I mean, we have the scene at the end of Shape of Things to Come where he shows up at Charles's door and says, "I'm going to kill your daughter." Here he kills Kimi and says multiple times, "I don't care that everyone on that boat is about to die," which I kind of believe, based on his actions here. He's absolutely not interested in that. All he wants is revenge. He just seems like such a hollowed out man here, who I think is a little bit like, he's kind of been like jilted by the island. It's like I gave you everything and yet I can't see the cabin. I can't see,
Right.
You don't want me, so I'll go. And I'll go sort of have my vengeance on Charles Widmore. And I think, to me, it feels like the fact that he ends up back on the island it's certainly not random. It's certainly not happenstance, but it's not necessarily his goal.
Well, maybe not at this point. Obviously, eventually it becomes his goal,
right.
Because after Locke tells him about, like Eloise Hawking and stuff, he murders Locke and then goes to round everyone up himself.
Right.
But I think that these things can both be true, right? Like Ben said last week, how many times do I have to tell you, John, I always have a plan. And I think that's still true here. I think that I feel like he still does. He must have more of a plan than, oh, well, time to go. I'm sacrificing himself. And whether that's just, I'm going to go off island and fuck up Widmore now, or I'm already thinking ahead, like one way or the other, the wheels in Ben's head are definitely still turning here. This is not, a moment of Ben just throwing up his hands and going through, going with the universe. I did think the moment where before he turns the wheel, where he says, "I hope you're happy now, Jacob." In my mind, that was something he was saying as he strained and turned the wheel, but I thought it was more interesting. He says it beforehand, and he says it, he kind of looks up, like toward the sky.
It's like you're saying it to God. Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting just because, like, I mean, that is the metaphor that's always been there for Jacob, but it's so interesting to me, like, Ben's never met the guy, he's never seen him, he's never talked to him. So, as far as he knows, right. Jacob is not a corporeal being. Jacob is God.
Yeah.
And it reminded me as well of what Ben as Henry Gale said in the Hatchback in season 2. What was the line? God doesn't know how long you've been here, John. He can't see this place any better than the rest of the world can. And I think that sometimes Ben feels that way about the God figure in his life. Is he really here? Is he really looking out for me? Or, does he even exist? And if so, why does he keep punishing me? He seems like, he struggles with this concept of God.
Absolutely. And I think what we really see on display here is, why does he keep punishing me? Like, going back to season 3, when Ben gets sick, and people are not supposed to get sick on this island, and he does. The island sends him a spinal surgeon, and he thinks that's a sign. But then, of course, we end up with, I'm in a wheelchair and you're not. I think Ben feels like something is being stolen from him, and there's nothing he can do about it. Like, his birthright is being taken away. That's what I saw in I Hope You're Happy Now, is I gave you everything, and you don't even, you're giving me nothing.
And that's the speech he makes before he, violently stabs Jacob to death.
Yeah.
Yeah. He killed God. By the way, you mentioned, Ben killing everyone on the freighter and feeling no remorse. We've had this debate, among ourselves and with our listeners for, like, going back to Man Behind the Curtain, like, was Ben responsible for the purge? Did he commit this act of mass murder?
Uh-huh.
Well, if you didn't want to pin that one on him, you certainly got to pin this one on him. He's a mass murderer now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this happens twice while Kimi's dying. You know, John says, don't kill him, you can't kill him, you'll kill everyone on that boat. And Ben says, I don't care. And then while John's trying to keep him alive, right before Ben says the thing about good command decisions, he says again, just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I find that almost hard to believe. But,
I don't.
you know, on one hand I do, and on one hand I don't. It's like, how many times does Ben have to show us that he doesn't care at all about anyone else? But on the other hand, he has shown us some small peaks of, you know, he seems to care about his people. His daughter did just die, and that seems to have affected him greatly. Like, who knows?
You killed my daughter. Stab, 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 stab. Yeah. No, I guess I'm not surprised by it. It's kind of something that Ben and Kimi have in common. You know, Kimi strapped this thing to his arm and his heart monitor and whatnot. Like, clearly he doesn't care about the lives of anyone on that boat.
Right. Well, Kimi, in the final like gun battle scene, Kimi kicks a grenade at one of his own men.
Yeah, he does.
And it kills that man. And he has no regard for anyone else's life.
No, I did. We obviously, we had this great conversation with Kevin Durand this year, and I've been so impressed, watching him in that character, which I think he does so well. His monologue when he goes down into the orchid.
It's so creepy.
Holy shit, man. Some of those line readings, like...
My heart stops beating, sends a little signal to the 500 pounds of C4 that I've got hardwired out there on the freighter. That'd kill a lot of innocent people, man. I'm bluffing. Need I remind you of how your daughter looked as she bled out, face down in the grass.
Oh, it makes my skin crawl.
Oh my god. And it feels so much like Mikhail Bakunin in the season 3 finale when you see the elevator go up and someone's about to come down, and then you think he's dead, but no, he shows up. I was like, okay, this is the thing we're doing now. But yeah, he's a great villain.
The fact that after Saeed, the fight scene with Saeed, oh my god, that's another thing. Saeed stabs him in the back, like deep. That knife goes into the dude's back. He gets shot in the Kevlar vest twice, and he fucking gets up and walks, I think, 2 miles, and goes down into the orchid to go after Ben because he hates the guy so much now. And I know that Kevin Durand, told us that he was thinking about, this character not, being an okay guy, and he said, I really didn't think he was a psychopath. And I've got to disagree after a scene like that. That man is psychopathic. Like, I don't think there's any way around it. Anyway, should we talk about Locke some more? Yeah.
So something that I think is becoming very clear in the Locke and Jack, something that happens twice in this episode that is very, very clear is Locke telling Jack that something has to happen, Jack trying to ignore it or disagree with it, and then Jack coming around to the idea of, oh no, that is in fact what we have to do. The first is you're going to have to lie in order to protect the people on this island. And then the second is, you're going to have to come back. I guess we don't really see all the events that transpire there, but
we see Jack certainly when he finally gets to that point, those points.
Right. And it's, it leads up ultimately to the end of season 6 where Jack says, oh, it turns out Locke was right about pretty much everything. But, Jack is not. I don't think he hates Locke anymore. I think he sort of sees Locke as a lost cause.
The scene between them in the orchid, it was a little bit of I felt like it was a sort of a pale imitation of the conversation in Exodus. Like Locke says there's no such thing as miracles, which I felt was like basically a weaker version of I don't believe in destiny. And, or Jack says that, excuse me. And Locke's response is, we'll just have to see which one of us is right, which, kind of pales in comparison to, yes, you do, you just don't know it yet. But I think your point kind of speaks to that. Like, Jack sees Locke as a lost cause, but I think Locke, he doesn't see Jack as a lost cause because he's predicting these things that are going to happen, but just the fire and the intensity that they both had at that scene in season 1, like, they just don't have it anymore. Like, they're tired of having this argument. Like,
No.
none of them actually thinks they're going to convince the other one here.
They've had it like every 2 weeks for the time that they've been on this island, and no one's ever convinced anyone else. And, you know, at this point, yeah, this is the last shot, and I think they both realize, like, nothing's going to change. And when John says, you know, you're going to have to lie, he's accepted, okay, you're leaving. Now what do we have to do to protect me and the island? And Jack, of course, says it's an island. It doesn't need protecting. But then as soon as they reach, you know, what turns out to be Penny's boat, Jack has this realization of like, oh no, we are going to have to lie. And everybody else is like, why are you talking about this right now? Like, we're almost here. And Jack ends up carrying this torch, right? Whereas everyone else is sort of, you know, he's the first one who decides we have to go back. And
yeah, I mean, and he's right about the lying. And interestingly, Locke says you have to lie to protect the island, where the realization Jack comes to is we have to lie to protect the people we left on the island, which is a little bit different.
Yes.
I just think Locke is a little bit full of shit in this scene, even though he turns out to be right. And, you know, I know I say stuff like this about Locke sometimes, but, like, you know, Locke says, you basically tells Jack, you know, you're lying to yourself when you're saying that this place isn't special and, you know deep down you're not supposed to leave. And I don't think any of that's true. I think that's yet to come. Like, eventually Jack will feel this, you know, regret and unease that Locke is describing. But in this moment, I don't think Jack's lying to himself. I think he really believes that this is just an island and that he's supposed to leave. Like, I don't think Locke's right about that. And you know, and Locke saying, Jack asked if it's not an island, what is it? And Locke says it's a place where miracles happen. And you know, this is instinctively something Locke has felt since he got his legs back. But does Locke really know what he's talking about? Like, clearly not, because every other line this episode is him begging Ben to tell him what's going on.
I mean, I think, you know, Jack is very much aware at this point that this is not just an island, right? There's weird shit going on with the freighter that's been offshore all season. You know, there's some sort of time crunch going on, which Jack is aware of. And I think has accepted, you know, he's accepted that the people on this island have a lot of power. Whoever's hunting them has a lot of power. They've been told at this point that they found the plane on the bottom of the ocean. Like, this is clearly not just an island. And Jack, I think, even knows that. But it's certainly not enough to stop him from leaving.
Maybe not just an island, but I feel like at this point in the show, everything that's going on is stuff that could still be explained by science and weird scientific phenomena. Like, that's what Daniel Faraday is doing here, right? And the stuff that Jack has experienced with time, like, he's seen Daniel Faraday's probably notebook with all of his equations and sketches in it. Like, we have not yet reached the point where I think Jack would necessarily need to see that the island, that there's something mystical about it, that there's magic, that there's, you know, a religious quality. Like, you know, Dharma was there doing science experiments. Right. So you're right, it's not just an island, but I don't think that Jack actually, you know, sees it the way Locke sees it. I don't think he's lying to himself about that.
No. And I think when he does come around to the point that we need to protect the people on it, it's out of a fear of Charles Widmore and people like him sort of coming to exploit the island and harming people in the process, right? So ultimately it kind of turns out to be the same thing, right? They don't want the island to be found by these particular forces.
The one thing that Locke said that did give me goosebumps in that scene, by the way, was when he said,
It's not an island. It's a place where miracles happen. And if you don't believe that, Jack, if you can't believe that, just wait till you see what I'm about to do.
And that was a line that was like, oh, okay, like, what is he about to do? And we do see that, and I think that that's probably one of the things that does impress Jack, because, like, as much as he tries to deny it at the end, that island disappears.
Yeah,
like,
there's no other possible explanation.
Yeah. Like, Locke fulfills that promise of wait until you see what I'm about to do, and it's quite, you know, there's no way around that. Like, that was something fucking mystical.
All right. Well, I guess let's stick with Jack for a little while.
I have a note on Jack that just says, Jack broke into a funeral parlor with a rock. Quote, "That's dark, Jack," as Ben would say.
So I think actually the easiest place to start with Jack is in the flash forward, because I think that's kind of the richest part. Like on Island, he's doing what we expect him to do, but in the flash forward, he's, we do see this progression into where he ends up at the end of season 3. Of course we see him begging Kate to consider the idea of going back and saying it's to protect Aaron, which is kind of, we'll leave that aside. Something that was interesting about that scene is that it felt like not a role reversal exactly, but Kate was very much sort of the voice of reason, the righteous anger, this role that Jack often fulfills when he's the hero rather than kind of the anti-hero. Like he's the one saying, "Are you crazy? Of course that, don't listen to John Locke," is typically what he's saying. We need to stick with the plan. It's almost, hearing Kate say that felt a little bit like hearing Jack speak back to himself in a way.
That's interesting. That's really, or even speak back to Locke almost.
Yeah.
Because Jack is kind of becoming the Locke, the new Locke. He's at the beginning of that cycle.
Right.
Huh.
Right. And Kate is the one to say, slow down. Like, absolutely not. Remember why we're here. Stay grounded in reality. And Jack is starting to come unglued from that reality.
It is a little bit cartoonish how dark Jack becomes. I mean, the moment when it was most kind of startling for me was that cut. They're coming onto the beach at Sumba after they've been on this raft for 8 hours, and the music is so beautiful, and they're so happy, and like tears in my eyes. And then there's this jarring cut to Jack driving his Jeep
in the Jeep with
music.
the metal.
Yeah. Oh my God, the Jeep is too much for me. But with his giant beard and the bandage on his head from when he almost jumped off the bridge,
right, and he's clearly high or intoxicated, and yeah,
it's and apparently it's only been a month since Jeremy Bentham came to see him. Sorry, I keep saying Jeremy Bentham. Since Locke came to see him, man, that happened fast.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, it's very effective storytelling in terms of how the hell does Jack get here? What did Locke say to him?
Yeah.
Knowing that, only moments before he did in fact get them off the island. I mean, he fulfilled what has been his purpose for the last, I guess it's only been a few months, but why would he ever want to go back there?
No, for sure. And that's one of the things that I think is just so tragic. I mean, the scene in the helicopter, and we should talk about the scene in the helicopter with Sawyer, but the reason they get to that point where they're basically stranded out there on the water and someone needs to jump and they can't go back to the island, Frank wants to turn around and bail back on the beach, and Jack keeps shouting at him.
Don't land! What? There's still fuel on the island! We gotta get to the boat or this chopper's useless! I'm telling you, I don't see the boat! Well, then keep looking!
And, he's demanding, you can't do it. He is so dead set. It's a bad call in the end.
Of course, it doesn't cost Sawyer's life, but it very well could have, It
could have cost them all their lives. What if they hadn't found the boat?
Right, and Jack is all about, live together, die alone. And here he is in a place where one of his people is sacrificing themselves. And yeah, it's Sawyer who, complicated relationship, but really?
Right. And
wow.
Speaking of live together, die alone, it's Sawyer who last week quoted live together, die alone back at Jack to justify going with him to go save Hurley. Sawyer, man. So this is the standout moment for Sawyer on this television show.
Oh my God.
This is the moment where he truly, sheds his anti-hero persona and becomes a hero, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it's almost, when we got to that scene, I don't want to say it's understated, but it doesn't sort of swell in this huge way that I was expecting. The music is relatively steady, and, it happens kind of quick, Sawyer whispers something to Kate, kisses her, and jumps, and she realizes what's happening. But everybody else on the helicopter is sort of taken aback.
Understated is an interesting word.
It's not quite right, but...
No, but it's what's the right word? It's not drawn out.
Right.
Like Sawyer's decision-making process is not drawn out. Like, Frank is yelling that they need to lose some weight, and the camera, cuts to... He says they got to be a couple 100 pounds lighter, and the camera kind of cuts to Hurley, and Hurley, is thinking like, oh no, I'm the heaviest person on here. I think that, I think the Sawyer of season 1, would have pushed, maybe Hurley, maybe Saeed...
Right.
Off the helicopter.
Well, Saeed naturally was the co-pilot, so we couldn't have done that.
Right, that's right. I was just thinking of how, Sawyer didn't like Saeed because he was Middle Eastern, and there was that whole thing. But, I mean, this is clearly not that Sawyer. Not only does he not think about that, it looks like he immediately, knows what he has to do.
He sort of looks around and says, okay.
And he's ready for it. He knows exactly what he has to tell Kate. Like he has in his mind that he wants to make sure his daughter is taken care of, and he wants to have one last kiss with Kate. And this is basically the end of the Sawyer-Kate storyline in terms of romance.
Yep.
And then the way he says, "Just do it, Freckles."
Yeah.
It's like a goosebump type moment, and it happens really, really fast.
Yeah. And then, and one thing that's really heartbreaking is, like 40 minutes of television later, he swims up to the beach where Juliet is sitting, and the freighter's just blown up, and he's making jokes. I mean, I think he thinks that they're gonna be able to come back for him, or this was temporary. And then he turns around and sees the smoke from the freighter in the distance, and sort of realizes, like, oh no, like I missed the boat in a very real way. I am in fact stranded here. I think. Probably part of what made it so easy was like, oh, fuck it, I'll just jump. We'll figure the rest out later.
I don't know that I agree, because he gives Kate those instructions, you know, of how to handle his affairs, basically, and put his affairs in order. Like, I don't... Whether he thinks that he's going to, not make it... I was impressed that he was able to swim back all the way to the island in those choppy waters, but whether he thinks he's dying, in the ocean, or whether he thinks he's not getting off the island, I think he was just in a good mood because he knew he had done a good thing.
Mm. Well, that too.
I mean, I think he felt comfortable with his choices and with his life at this point. I mean, we've seen Sawyer throughout the season. I mean, even though he does say, I've had enough of this rock when they get on the helicopter, like, he's asked Jack, I think as recently as an episode or two ago, like, why are you so focused on getting off the island? And it was kind of a joke, but it kind of wasn't.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I think Sawyer, he's just in a good mood because he did something good for Kate.
Yeah.
And his friends.
That could be. And you're right that he's one of the ones who has kind of said consistently, like, don't super have anything to get back for. Like, he chooses Locke's side at the beginning of this season, chooses to try to make a life on the island, etc. And with
Clementine, it doesn't really seem like he desperately needs to have a relationship with his daughter. Right. I think he's kind of afraid of that, but he just wants to make sure she's taken care of.
Right.
And I think he feels like he's done that here because he trusts that Kate is gonna do it for him.
Yeah.
Of course, that scene, to me, that's a scene about Juliet. Mm-hmm. Juliet, who once again, every goddamn week, there's a scene this week where she's looking so happy and talking to Faraday and like, I'm going to go last because I want to make sure everyone gets off this island and then I'll go.
Famous last words.
She seems so non-concerned that anything is going to go wrong. Like, she's the only person, I think, of all of the main characters who just has no doubt in her mind that everything is going to be great because she's just so convinced that she's getting off this island. So to me, this was the inevitable outcome. Also thought it was a great intro to the Sawyer-Juliet romance.
It really
Don't know
was.
if that was intentional or not, but...
Oh, I think it was.
I hope so.
And it was really... Sawyer rolls up and he says, nice day for a swim. And then there's sort of a slow realization of what's happened. And I assume they sat down and had a drink together and, life took its course. But at least I hope.
Yes.
Yeah, but man, poor Juliet.
Desmond, by the way... Get some lovely moments this week.
Oh, he does. It was so... at this point in the season, I, as the viewer, had more or less forgotten that Penny was out here searching. It's just been so long since so much has happened since the Constant, that when they... when her boat appears on the horizon, it's very reminiscent of season 1. Super, super feels like Tom Friendly's boat pulling up. and then you hear the deckhand speaking, and then you hear somebody say Ms. Widmore, and I was like, oh fuck, that's Penny's boat. Somebody finally gets a resolution on this dang show. And I know, like, I ultimately things happen and it doesn't quite work out so nicely, but I was just so happy. Just so, like, purely happy.
I think that part of the reason, I think there are two reasons that Reunion is so wonderful. One is that, like you're saying, it's so out of nowhere, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and not only have they been building to it since The Constant, like, another impressive storytelling thing. They've been building towards this for two full seasons, because we get the listening station scene at the end of season 2, the phone call with Charlie in the Looking Glass at the end of season 3, and then the call in The Constant. And
but they return to it so infrequently that you forget about it.
No, for sure. It's a really, really slow burn kind of moment. And when she shows up, it's just, you're right, it's like, holy shit. Penny, it's out of absolutely nowhere. But the second thing I love about it is how Desmond climbs up onto the boat separately and gets his, like, private reunion with her before they all come around the other side. It's such a nice touch. He's so eager to get to her. He can't wait for the boat to go around and be loaded on. Like, he scales the side of that boat.
Yeah, he, like, throws himself over the side of the boat. Oh, it's so wonderful.
It's amazing.
Well, and, I'm just going to sit with that for a second before we move on.
I'm gushing. But everyone should go back and listen to our episode on The Constant with Ian and Sonia if they haven't already, because they're so lovely.
Beautiful.
They're the loveliest. I have a couple quick notes here. We haven't talked about Sun all that much. I just want to say that I think Yoon-Jin Kim is phenomenal in this episode. Both her reaction to Jin's death, which is so real and heartbreaking, and also badass Sun when she's going to Widmore and wants to conspire with him, like.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Very different Suns, but both, like, very compelling.
It's really fun to see Sun in her element, which is very much sort of in the halls of power and wealth, like in the real world. Like in the, the little hints that we've gotten. She is stone-faced and, like, ice cold and knows exactly what she wants and how to get it. And she seems to be not afraid of anything. And it's a good reminder that, like, Sun, like all these characters, had a whole life off the island that was extremely different from life on the island. And those skills didn't necessarily translate to life on the island, but when she's back, she can really flex that power.
Yeah, and it's such a different person, both from the Sun we know on the island and the Sun we see in some of her flashbacks, where, she's the, sort of domestic housewife character put upon by the controlling husband and controlling father. Controlling father, exactly. Yeah. And on the island at the beginning, she's timid and she's afraid to upset Jin, and it's like, no, naturally that's not who she is at all. And it's sad that she, she had to live a decent portion of her life, like trying to be, being, forced to be this other person, when really, you're right, she does belong in the halls of power.
Yeah.
Like, she can handle those situations like the best of them.
Yeah, and it's cool to see that someone's going to try to conspire with Charles Widmore. Like, once again, in this flash forward, we get Ben. I wouldn't say Ben is conspiring with Jack, but like a little bit. Ben is saying, "Oh, we together are going to have to work to bring these people back, including John's body." And then you get Sun approaching Widmore, and it's like, oh, once again, all the alliances are going to shift. Is it really a lost finale if they don't?
No, it's not. It's not. No, God, this is such a good finale, Rosie. Like, it's so action-packed. The sequence, we haven't even talked about, like, we've talked about the wheel sequence, but how that transitions right into the helicopter going down on the ocean sequence, which is ridiculous. Like, we haven't really talked at all about the fight sequence, the gunfight between, the others and Kimi's men, and the Kimi Saeed fight. Like, it's just got spectacular sequence after spectacular sequence. By the way, remember Kevin Durant told us how he, like, smashed his face open jumping over a boulder and was covered in blood? Yeah, they used that shot of him jumping over the boulder.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that the way he told the story, it sounded like they probably refilmed it with him just ducking around the side like he was supposed to. No, they used it. He jumped over. They didn't use what came after with his face covered in blood. But anyway, I just wanted to point that. Lots of good stuff this episode is my point. Lots and lots of good stuff. Maybe I'm just a sucker for finales, but I just couldn't get enough of this one.
Yeah, we actually had an interesting conversation off the air, offline about this over the course of the week, which is that I think you just generally like the finales way more than I like them. And of course I like them. But I think, like, so, I mean, I have like many, many pages of notes on this episode. You've seen me flipping through them the whole time. I think what I really like about the mid-season episodes, though, is how deep you get to go with one person or with one thing. They're not quite as action-packed, but I think I really appreciate the depth and the moment, the chance to like sit with one character or with one plot point. Whereas this one, like, it's all coming at you at once, which is like an awesome viewing experience. But I don't know. It is also incredibly rich, but it's just like, I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of like a metaphor and failing. It's very hard to hold all of this in your head at once. And I think that's been the case for like the last 4 episodes of this season. Whereas like the first half of the season was like these incredible, probably up through the Jack episode, Something Nice Back Home, are these like rich, personal, like, they're full of mystery, but they're also like, oh my God, I finally understand like what was going on with Jack. Whereas the last few episodes of this season are like bang, 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 bang. And I feel like I have less of a chance as a viewer to kind of sit with those things.
That's really interesting. You're right. I definitely like the finales more than you do. I guess maybe this is just, like personal preference for television show, but I mean, I feel like the finale is like the reward at the end of the season. Like, I love the same things you're describing, the deep dives into the character. But for me, the finale is like, it's like the payoff. It's like I sat through, 12 weeks of, these deep dives into the characters, which are, again, great. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I feel like the whole time I'm waiting for the finale. Like, this was the point. Like, to me, it's like this, all of these things, these pieces were getting put into place, and we were understanding all of these characters over the course of the season, so that when the shit hits the fan, we could have these moments in these sequences, things like Ben standing at the wheel saying, I hope you're happy now, Jacob, and then all hell breaking loose. Like, that's a tremendous character moment for Ben that is a payoff to, the deep dive that we took with him in, The Man Behind the Curtain and The Shape of Things to Come. And, Jack saying, or the Desmond and Penny moment on the boat, like, that's the payoff we get for The Constant and for the storylines between them previously. Sawyer jumping off the helicopter. Yeah. Sawyer, by the way, doesn't even get a flashback episode this year.
No, he doesn't.
This
because
is
he doesn't get off the island.
Right, that's true. But my point is that, right. But that's the payoff moment for, all of this time we've spent with Sawyer. So to me, it's a little bit like they serve different purposes. But I kind of feel like the finales are what it's all about. Like, this is why we did all that other stuff, so that we could get this 2-hour, chaos fest.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are both perfectly good and valid takes, and maybe part of the reason I feel this way is in season 4, like, every episode is a banger. There's like no weak point.
True.
But yeah, no, I agree. I would disagree with your argument that the finale is the point. I think the journey is the destination in Lost and in life.
But the finales are just part of the journey.
They are. But I don't know that for me they're necessarily like the high points along the way, although they are excellent and action packed, and you know, they do have all those payoffs. But I also really enjoyed the mid-season payoffs. That's all.
When we did that bracket competition, to choose the best episode, like The Constant won, and that's not a finale, but The Constant was maybe a little bit of the exception. I mean, like, the episodes
like
that were
6 of the Elite 8, I think, were either season premieres or season finales.
Gosh, I wish I had it in front of me right now. Actually, let me look. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I'm bringing up our bracket here. Through the Looking Glass, The End, Live Together, Die Alone, The Pilot, Exodus, and Man of Science, Man of Faith. You're right. 6 of the 8 premieres or finales. The other 2 were The Constant and Walkabout.
Oof. Oof. But didn't we? I mean, we had a whole argument when the bracket was live about how The Shape of Things to Come should have made it further than it did. I voted for it.
I certainly think so. Anyway,
there's no right or wrong way to watch Lost. Just sort of an interesting conversation we had offline this week that we thought we'd share.
We should go to Michael Emerson, because we've been talking for a while, and I know that everyone wants to hear from Michael Emerson.
I agree. As Sammy mentioned at the top of this episode, Michael was last on when we watched The Shape of Things to Come, which we've referenced a number of times. He also joined us during season 2.
Yeah, so the interview is going to start with Michael talking, and he's going to be responding here to a question I asked where I basically referenced the scene in No Place Like Home Part 1 where Kimi points the gun to his head and sticks the gun right into his forehead, and Ben, Michael Emerson, he flashes his eyes upward to look at the gun in a kind of interesting way, even though he doesn't move the rest of his body. His eyes flash upward to see it. And I asked him if he remembered doing that and what was going on in that moment in his head.
I do. It's always terrifying when there's a gun, whether it's loaded or not. It's terrifying when a gun is pointed at you, and if it's touching your head, So you just, what you want to play is that your life is passing before your eyes, and some philosophy is mixed in with a sense of the practicality of the moment. Like, is that a gun? Is that a real gun? Would it kill me if it went off right now? That kind of stuff. So I've been held up at gunpoint in my life. And it's interesting how many different things you're thinking about at the same time. It's like, yes, I'm going to get my money, but I also want to look at the weapon. Is that, because please don't let me give up my money because you have a toy gun. That kind of thing. So, and sometimes, if you're acting and you know what the frame is, you have a sort of abstract sense of what makes a picture, what might make a good picture. And if there's a big old shot of down the muzzle of the gun, looking at you, quivering at the other end, then, why not look at the bloody thing? It's something for your eyes to do while you're in a state of terror and
it's an impressive,
desperately planning your next move.
So that was just you. That wasn't direction. That was your call to do the thing with the eyes.
That kind of stuff that just happens in the moment.
Interesting.
I don't think there would never be a stage direction of that. If there was a stage direction of that, you would play against it. Because all of us actors, we secretly resist printed stage directions in the script. Whatever it is,
because
like
you know better.
Ben gives Locke a sidelong look and a smirk. Well, then the thing you're absolutely not going to do is a sidelong look and a smirk. You'll find some other way to fulfill the writer's dramatic wishes, but it ain't going to be the one they dish you.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah. So, and that's the only way you can reserve some magic for yourself as a performer, is to find something new, something better. It's all right. It's a conversation between writers and actors, and
this is only sort of tangentially related to that. And I'm sorry, Riz. Yeah, this is when I had actually taken off the question list, but now I'm curious. One thing that I always find interesting, watching Ben and watching how you play him, is that sometimes even in the most dramatic moments, you're also extremely funny. And Ben has all of these lines. There's one in season 5, in The Dead is Dead, that I was watching, where you shoot Caesar, that played by Saeed Tagmaoui. You shoot him in the chest, and he flies backwards from this giant rifle. And then you look at everyone else and say, "Now this gentleman and I are going to take a boat. Does anyone have any problem with that?" And it's like, you just shot a man in the chest, but I'm cracking up. How much of that is the writing versus you trying to play stuff for laughs versus just like, that balance between the heavy drama, the melodrama, and the comedy, I find really interesting.
All the great violent movies that I watched growing up, there is always an undercurrent of humor in it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, it's a way to temper the violence of the moment, to make light of it, but that was another interesting and complicated scene to shoot. So maybe it was just it partly rises out of the exhaustion at the end of a long day with guns and pull cables and stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you do a lot of that, especially in these later seasons. I mean, in season 2 and 3, you get to sit around the barracks a lot, and you're captured in the hatch. And in seasons 4 and 5, pretty much the whole time, you're running around the jungle, shooting at stuff, being shot at, trying to avoid getting murdered violently. It's a totally different ballgame.
Well, I do believe that finding the humor in a scene, particularly on serious shows or violent shows, is a way to give the audience some relief. What else does it do? It runs counter. It's like if you're playing Shakespeare, the tragedies must be funny, and the comedies must be heartbreaking. That's a kind of equation. That's a Shakespearean equation. So I kind of have that. I have absorbed that. So the more dramatic a show is, the more I'm looking for the light notes, the humor. I just think, I think I'm a humorous person, so I just try always to find that. If there is a possible comic line reading, I will at least try it. It's good. It puts the audience in a predicament. Do I go with the tragedy of these circumstances, or do I find humor from this terrible person? Oh, it's uncomfortable. What's my role? They say to themselves.
I usually laugh. Laugh.
Why not? Why not laugh?
Oh man. I'm sorry. So I got us totally sidetracked here on Dead is Dead. Let's bring it home with season 4. The end of season 4.
Sammy, give me 1 second to let a whimpering dog out of this room.
Absolutely. Yes, I just wanted to and we've alluded to this a couple times, but those scenes down in the Orchid Station, where you move the island. A couple of questions about those. The moment of, I guess we've already talked somewhat about Kimi, but I am kind of curious logistically about the scene where you jump out of the closet and stab Kevin Durand in the neck a bunch of times, which is a whole nother thing about the...
Speaking of a violent scene, yeah.
I'm just interested in how you do something like that.
It's hard to set it up. I'm not a natural athlete or a murderer, and he's a very capable physical presence. So, I can't remember how we set it up, except I was very nervous about the whole thing. And you're always nervous that in your weakness and excitement, you will actually hurt somebody. So for me, it always ends up being about, how do I make this safe? Because I in my career, I'm constantly getting injured by overexcited actors that are my scene partners. So I am so aware of that it's almost hard for me to be in a scene where there's any kind of combat like that, because I'm so fretful about me getting hurt or them getting hurt, and at the end of the day, it doesn't require any huge amount of vengeful energy or passion or anything like that. Those scenes should be played like a dance. They should be carefully rehearsed and go very smoothly and with very little tension. And Kevin is great at that because he does a lot of it. So everything was by the numbers, nice and easy, and not really much acting required until you get to close-ups, at which point you're no longer struggling. That's the way to play that stuff. I would play a scene of combat with him any day because he's just easy. He is so accomplished. It's good. It's good that way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The other scene down there, after that takes place, of course, you go down to move the island, which we should talk about. But it's another very physical scene where you're turning that wheel, or at least it seems on screen to be very physical. Was there actually a physical thing that you had to push and it was straining and you were crying, or was that all just acting, or was there really something you were doing?
Yeah, they built the whole thing. It was a whole big thing. It was real and it was heavy and it was hard to push. I'll give you a serious answer about that scene, but let me say first that the pretend ice that they used was really slippery. So it was really hard to, you couldn't keep your footing. There was no way to apply pressure to whatever that turning wheel thing was.
I think they called it the frozen donkey wheel. At least that's how fans.
Yes, that's right. You've had access to so much material, I swear. But it was a scene that I understood in my mind what they wanted, but it was hard to deliver and it was, it looked cold, but it was actually hot. We were overdressed and it was in a heated studio.
But you're wearing a parka.
Yeah, so it was that, I would say, is one of the more punishing scenes in my experience from that series. So you're just trying to push a heavy thing and your feet are slipping and you're trying to make it look like you're making something titanic move, when you're mainly just trying to keep yourself from falling on your face. So if you see anguish on my visage, that's kind of what it's coming from.
It's real anguish, just.
Yeah, it is.
Of course.
Yeah, there was some anguish.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. Well, I guess one last Alex question. In the very, very end of the series, in your Flash Sideways episode in season 6, when you play Dr. Linus, the history teacher, and Alex, I believe it's a history teacher, and Alex appears as your student. It's a really sweet and tender storyline, and it almost, for me as a viewer, I think fulfilled part of that redemptive impulse, or that desire to see Ben redeemed as a parent, even though of course in the action of the series he's not, he doesn't get to be in the church at the end and everything. But what were those scenes like to film, and what did you make of those?
Like you, I found them really touching. It's after all of that, all those episodes, all those seasons, to think that there was a happier possibility, that they could have had sweetness and something like happiness and all of that, and that in every dimension she is a dear girl, and in every dimension her mother is a dear woman. And so that's just, those things are missed opportunities, or those are looking in the window at a happy home when you're out in the snow. That's how I chose to look at it. So it was, I thought they were very moving. Truly. Hard to get through those scenes, really. It's such a change of tone.
Yeah.
Spent years being, this rough and calculating person, and suddenly here's a look at what could have been.
I find it so interesting in the Flash Sideways that you're and I don't mean this word in a negative way, although it might sound like you're kind of meek. I mean, Ben is this sort of meek history professor version of, or teacher version of himself, and it's just, you can sort of see the connection between, I mean, maybe this is what you were referring to earlier, that this has been, who he was supposed to be, or who he would have been if his life hadn't gotten so screwed up for various reasons.
Yeah, I think what I thought about it was that this is his essence. All that other stuff, all those seasons, that was like a false self-vision. That was a false mission. It was all just so much violence and terror and sadness, when it could have been probably what he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be a mild-mannered teacher. It would have suited him.
Thank you for saying mild-mannered. That's really what I was going for. That's better than me.
But yeah, if his father hadn't sort of squirreled him away to the Dharma Initiative as a kid, you wonder.
Yeah, sad.
How did you feel about the? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say all that latter work. Late 5th season and season 6. It was all so. What's the feeling? Some nostalgia, as if it was already lost to us, as if it was. This was it. It was winding down, and there was no heroics left. There was just memory and regret and the hope for a better life for your offspring if you have them.
You felt that way as an actor? Or you felt like that's what the show
was? I felt that way as an actor, as a character. It was. To me, it was mighty writing. It was so damn good. Can't say enough about those guys. Strong stuff. Very, their humanity is powerful.
That's what people don't get about the ending, in my opinion. I mean, the humanity of it is astounding. I've not seen, and I haven't watched everything that's aired on TV, but I've watched enough to feel like there has not been another TV show that has brought such a strong sense of you said humanity, but really humanism, right? Of that kind of ending with what they were trying to communicate thematically. It's unlike anything else.
And not how many 100 different ways could they have ended the series? And some of them could have been gimmicks or tricks or neat and tidy things or trickery or something. Instead, they set aside all the sci-fi or fantasy dimensions or the play of mathematics and dimensionality, and they made it the simple spiritual thing that was at the heart of the show anyway, I thought. So, and I think every show predicts its own ending or creates its own ending by virtue of how it has told its story. And our show seemed to me to be one that was always exploding from the middle, always moving outward in like a big bang in every direction. So where's the ending of that? The ending of that is to come back to the middle, to the original explosion. And they knew that, Damon and Carlton. It was Jack's eyes opening and Jack's eyes closing. Mm-hmm. And because when we first see Jack, we think maybe this is the end of his life, or has he woken up on the other side, or something like that. And so the ending matches that. It makes a kind of perfect circle. So I was always happy with it. It really worked for me.
To bring it back just for a second before we close it out to the questions about Alex and Rousseau and the Flash Sideways that Rosie asked, how did you feel about this sort of suggestion that after everything that they had both been through, that Ben and Rousseau maybe should be there's some connection between them at the end? I thought that was an interesting choice.
Had there been time enough and money, another season, something like that,
maybe.
Sure. Maybe. It made that shooting of just those little domestic scenes at her house. She's cooking, that stuff, like, a taste of like the normal life of Earthlings. How nice that would have been in the context of it all that.
This question may be way off base, and I apologize if I've just misread this, but in Dead is Dead in season 5, when you see Alex and she appears to you as a ghost, and you say her name, you say Alex, and you sort of have this. Maybe I've been watching too much Lost lately, and maybe this is my problem, but the way you say her name seems to me to be a very similar affectation to the way Rousseau says Alex, with an emphasis on the Alex at the beginning. And it's just, am I reading too much into that, or was there something intentional there?
Oh God, now you're getting into line readings.
My bad.
No,
My bad.
not at all. I wasn't consciously trying to echo her mother, but I think if you were that child's father and her mother called her name a certain way, you would, in a moment of transcendent visitation like that, you would try to connect as best you could by saying her name the right way, to include her mother or her mother's spirit in that moment when you only have one word to express it with.
I appreciate you're taking a question where you had no idea what I was talking about and turning it into something beautiful. That's very nice. And maybe that's what you were doing. I like that interpretation a lot.
Yeah. That was very moving, that scene.
Yeah.
Became as a ghost. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I am a childless person, but I can feel what that, some glimmer of what that must be like for a real parent.
Well, she yells at you. I mean, it's not even a nice scene. You see her and there's a split second of niceness, and then she pins you up against a wall.
Yeah. It's all right.
Yeah.
What was that like to shoot? Tell us a little more about that.
I can't remember the day.
You were down under the temple. You crawled into
right. Yeah, I knew it was subterranean there.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of weird magic happened underneath the temple.
Yeah.
Just I think his role, or my role of playing him, was to be open to this. To if this was a moment where something had to be atoned for, or some punishment had to be received, then bring it. Nothing she could bring would be as bad as the loss of her.
It's sad that it turns out to be a lie then. I mean, it's, as with many things with Ben that turn out to be sad. I mean, of course, as we learn later, he's not really being judged. He's not really seeing his daughter. It's part of this grand plan that we will not get into here by the Man in Black to manipulate him into service and into killing Jacob. So it would have been much nicer for Ben if he really did have that judgment that he wanted, but he was tricked, like he's been tricked before, even when he thinks he's in command.
But Ben, just like the actor that plays him, can only operate on what he has at hand or what he sees before him. So, and that's always my guiding principle, is not to know too much about where things are going.
Gosh, to the extent that you can be working on anything now, what are you working on nowadays?
I'm not working on very much. I read plays when they come to me, and I don't know. I'm probably going to record a little monologue for a theater company I'm associated with to put online to raise money and stuff like that. But both Carrie and I are kind of enjoying being off the treadmill of our theatrical lives. Mm-hmm. This is a chance to feel what it would be like if you weren't an actor. What if you were a gentleman farmer, or just something else, or a retired person? What would you do with your days? Because that's now what we're doing.
It's so hard to come back in after talking with Michael Emerson, because he says everything at like maximum eloquence. and I feel like I have nothing to add.
It's so true. It's so true. One thing you said that I loved, the line about how when you're playing Shakespeare, the tragedies must be funny and the comedy must be heartbreaking. I thought that was such a brilliant description of how he takes those melodramatic moments and what makes them hilarious and why that matters. But I also thought it worked the other way on Lost, because I was thinking of what's comedy on Lost? It's Hurley's, flashback episodes early in the show, where these are supposed to be funny. He won the lottery, but bad things happen. He's running through the airport, ha ha ha. But really, it's tragic because he's cursed and people near him are getting hurt and dying, and he feels like his life is horrible. Like that's the comedy being heartbreaking. So it works both ways.
Yeah, yeah, I agree that. I mean, even in this episode, we see so many of Ben's little asides. The line that we've quoted a couple times where he talks about emotional leadership. I mean, it's just said in this absolute deadpan. Yeah. Which is the opposite of emotion.
And I thought the funniest one actually was, couldn't find the anthuriums, could you?
It is pretty funny. And even the scene that you alluded to where he meets Jack, shows up, they don't exactly meet in the funeral home, and he says, "That's dark, Jack." It's funny because it's true. And I think that's part of what Ben does, is that he just kind of says things out loud rather than beating around the bush. But an absolutely fabulous character.
So good, and so grateful that he spent some time with us. So we're here at the end of season 4, and so we're going to bring up a tradition that we've done the last couple seasons. We're going to each of us pick our most valuable player and our least valuable player, MVP and LVP, for season 4 of Lost. We haven't talked about this in advance, so neither of us knows what the other one is going to say. Do you want to start with MVP or LVP?
I'd like to start with most valuable player.
Okay. So who do you got?
The necessary caveat that I think both of us would choose Saeed every season, given the opportunity, so we kind of tend to set Saeed aside. I think for me this season it's Desmond.
Okay.
Both as a character, because of course we get some absolutely tremendous Desmond episodes, but also because, you made a joke a couple weeks ago about Desmond sort of suddenly being the captain of the freighter.
I did.
But Desmond steps up here in a big way. He's on the freighter for most of the season. He's having to navigate these this incredibly tense scene. He doesn't have any information. He's at one point flashing through time, and he's got to solve these just unbelievably weird curveballs that are thrown at him. And he largely does. I mean, he understands the concept of the constant, and he's able to sort of pull himself out of that, of course, with help from Penny and Saeed and Daniel. He steps up and attempts to defuse the bomb. Of course, it isn't ultimately successful, but it would have been very easy to say, "Oh fuck, I have no idea how to do this," and walk away from it. And when it's time to go, it's time to go. And he gets everybody. He gets most everybody onto the helicopter. I think it's a really strong season for Desmond, and this would have been a really nice place to end his arc. That, of course, doesn't happen, but
thank goodness. There's a scare, by the way, where Desmond looks like he's going to die when they fall into the water. Mm-hmm. And at that point, he's not one of the Oceanic Six. He could have died there. That was very scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, that's my argument for Desmond.
So I love that Desmond is your MVP, and the reason I love that is because my MVP is Penny.
Oh, how wonderful.
Very, very
That's
perfect.
Tremendous.
No, just for the reason we discussed earlier, which is that this whole time she's been out there looking for him, in the background, never given up. And at the very, very, very most important moment in the nick of time, she is there to save the day unexpectedly. And if that's not MVP material, I don't know what is.
What? That's just poetry. Shut it down right there. That's hard to top.
No. We got to do our LVPs now. You want to go first? You got to give me your LVP.
This is an extraordinarily hard question.
Okay, it was easy for me.
Yo, you go ahead then.
Charles Widmore.
Just because he sent assassins to the island?
Yeah, he planted a plane under the ocean to convince everyone that our heroes were dead, and then he sent a team to the island to kill everyone. How much worse does it get than that? Also, now that I'm thinking about it, I made his daughter the MVP and him the LVP. That's funny. No, I mean, Charles Widmore, I think, is the show's first, true arch-villain, and I think that he deserves LVP status.
Does LVP mean worst character, or does it mean character who least succeeds at fulfilling their mission?
I would say that is open to interpretation. Although I will note that Charles Widmore does spectacularly fail at fulfilling his mission, so it might work on both levels.
That's a really good argument. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because ultimately, people do get off the island. He does not kill Ben. You know, his science team doesn't bring him back any useful results. In fact, they get swept up in time.
And he puts his own daughter's life at risk.
Yes, although he doesn't super seem to care.
Anyway, who's now that I've ruined it by naming the only true LVP, who do you got?
Can I say Jacob?
Please.
Jacob doesn't come through at all in this season. I mean, he is called upon in some very like literal and real ways, and he does nothing. In fact, he allows himself to be impersonated by the Man in Black, and to give instructions that ultimately I don't know that are contradictory to the instructions that he would have given. But man, the island is like under attack in a very real way in this season. And
right.
Ben is begging for his help, and he just doesn't show up, man. And I know that's like saying God is the LVP or whatever, but like
I'm cool.
We find out later, like Jacob, of course, is real and can sort of show up and participate in human affairs, and he just doesn't.
He chooses not to.
No,
that's not his style.
To the point that you kind of do start to wonder by the end of this episode, like, is this even real, or is this just sort of like a god that the others have created, and maybe no one's ever seen him? Because by the end, I think we kind of know. Like we talked about this a bit at the top of the episode in terms of Ben's waning faith. The only sort of real thing we get is the scene in the cabin in late season 3.
Yeah, the help me scene.
Yeah. Which is may or may not probably is Jacob, but he just vanishes.
No, I think there's all sorts of fascinating stuff in what you just said. The show does set up, by the time Jacob is actually introduced as a physical, corporeal character that you see in person, by that point it would have been very easy for them to just accept Jacob as mythical, as
right.
Not really a physical
truly
being.
Mythical.
Because that's all we've gotten at this point.
Right.
And so, I mean, the God metaphor stuff, like it works on so many different levels, like, with faith in a being you can't see, and you're asking him for help, and why isn't he there? And that works metaphorically, but then it's so interesting. Oh, he is there. And
right.
He's been choosing, apparently, to stay behind the scenes and let the Man in Black, interfere. Like, I get, which is weird, because I get the idea that Jacob likes to let people make choices, that's what he's all about, is choices. Ooh, I should remember that when we get to the variable. Side note. But
he's also all about protecting the island.
Right, and he's letting the Man in Black, run rampant out there, essentially.
Yeah. Well,
and speak in his name.
Yeah, and show up as Christian, like, in all of these different ways, and I don't know. And this is, like, where the problem is that we just don't know anything about Jacob at this point. Like, is he omnipresent? Does he know that the Man in Black is doing this? Probably.
But no, I mean, but it's like a God works in mysterious ways thing, right? Like, I don't know, I'm not that religious a person, but that's a thing, right? I mean, you're not supposed to, have like a firm understanding of how and why God is operating in the way that God is.
Yeah, you're totally right. Like, at this point, the show could have said, okay, well, Jacob is just like the name that they have for God, and to John, that's the island, and to whatever. But no, Jacob does turn out exactly as you said. He turns out to be a real person who presumably is sort of watching all this happen and choosing to let people make their own choices, I guess. And
I gotta say, strong LVP choice of Jacob for sitting off. I thought that Widmore was the one true LVP, but I like the Jacob argument too.
Thank you. I came into this episode not really knowing what I was going to go with, and after that conversation about Ben has just been sitting with me. So after you pulled out Charles Widmore, I was like, uh-oh.
So we're going to be at season 5 next year. How did we get this far?
1 week at a time.
You know what this is sort of a hindsight, and we'll, leave it at this, but I remembered after last night I finished watching the finale. Do you remember that trailer that they did between seasons 4 and 5? Oh yeah, because you didn't actually.
No, because I didn't watch Lost in
point.
real time. I watched it because you sent it to me this morning. But I
how this is the trailer with the Frey song, which was new at the time. You Found Me, which combined scenes from season 4 and stuff that was a preview of season 5. How good is that trailer? Right? Like, am I crazy? It's quite good.
That song's a little cheesy, I think. But
okay. I guess I'm revealing that I like the Frey, but whatever.
Well, it is tricky because it's blending things we've already seen, things we don't know, and it's kind of blending timelines a little bit.
Very Lost-like.
So there's a sense of like you've got to watch it really closely to figure out what's new. Yeah, I can see being a Lost fan and seeing that and being like, oh my god, got to take notes, and figure out what's coming.
I just remember, like I was 16 years old, and when you're like at that young age, I'm so old now. But like stuff feels like it takes forever. Like the gap between seasons, like it ends in May and you have to wait till January for season 5 or whatever. It just feels like such a long time. Mm-hmm. And so then you get a trailer like this, like, oh my god, so exciting, Lost is coming back. Whereas now it's like 7 months goes by like nothing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we'll be back next season.
Yeah, wow. Always weird to end a season. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you again for coming along on this ride with us through season 4.
We love it when you share your thoughts on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast, Facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast, on Reddit, on YouTube, wherever you tell us what you think of our podcast and share your ideas about Lost. We very, very much appreciate it and hope you will keep doing it next season.
Absolutely. We are going to go into a hiatus for a while. Don't have a premiere date yet for season 5. We'll let you know when we do, but in the meantime, we will be interviewing, preparing, hopefully lining up a great season 5 for you.
You've heard us ask it before. You know it that we'd love it if you could rate and review us wherever you get the podcast. We're on Apple Podcast and Stitcher and Spotify and iHeartRadio and Player FM and on YouTube and wherever you listen. Give us 5 stars and write a review and tell us what you think, and that'd be real nice of you.
Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen, and our cover art is by Danny Roth.
Namaste.